So welcome everybody. I am delighted to welcome Matteo Pericoli uh, to the channel. Welcome, Matteo.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure, great pleasure.
So you and I have been exchanging and corresponding for quite a number of years, and you've worked with me in the past with my students. In fact, you were one of the very first people I ever beamed into my classroom to
Yeah.
meet with younger students who were learning all about your Unfurled series. On the screen now, we've got a most beautiful drawing, or certainly a section of a drawing. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the drawing that's on the screen now?
Well, it's a portion of a somewhat long drawing that I made in 2007, I think, for the American Airlines terminal at JFK in New York, which was a building under construction then, and there was a gigantic wall that was supposed to be a temporary wall dividing different phases of construction. And it just happened that I had published before a few years prior to 2007 a few books on the city of New York, the unfurled books, and which are fold out accordion-like books in which one can see the entirety of the island of Manhattan. And the person who, the architect who was the director of the site, found himself with this gigantic wall, 120 meters long, like 5 stories high. And he had seen the books, or I believe a piece on the books in Architectural Record. This is my connection with architecture, that I lost architecture a long time ago because I wanted to be an architect. And so he called me up and said, we have this big wall. Is there anything that can be done? And I was used to, turning cities into miniatures, and I found myself instead with basically a portion of a wall that was as big as a city block. And so I was terrified because I'm very slow at doing my things. But I said, yes, of course. And that's when we began working on an idea of producing a drawing that would go as a mural onto this gigantic wall that would represent, I think, the 40 plus cities, the destinations of American Airlines, and that they would be shown in a very non-architectural way. So proportions would be wrong, perspectives would not be proper. And the idea would be that this mass of buildings would feel like the memories of our journeys, in which the space occupied by what we see is not proportional to the size of the things that we see. And so the beginning of the mural is this portion that you're showing, which is New York, put together in a very organic but unrealistic way. And then slowly the drawing changes and it morphs into many other cities and many other memories, many other parts of the world that I took from the internet, because at the time, finally, I could use the internet. And so there are many places that are anonymous places from these 40 cities, and they are all, meshed into one another, as the information about traveling, I think, is stored in the brain in a kind of order that we do not know, but that we can, recall according to the emotions that the places, ingrain in our brain. So there is a desire to offer an emotional rendering of what architecture feels like to non-architects.
But also with the sense of memory, um, I always find it interesting when I introduce your work to classes and I have the unfurled books and I do get the class to stand up and we unfold it. And oh my goodness, it's the longest book we've ever seen and it's so exciting. It's almost as if, you can't actually really take it all in at once. you can look at it from a great distance, and then of course you lose the relationship to detail, maybe. But it is almost as if within the length, which equates to a duration, I always feel, that we have to use memory even within your drawing to experience the drawing as a whole.
It's there is a fortunate relationship between that work and my, you know, very, very personal experience with the city of New York, and in particular with Manhattan, because I, you know, every time when I moved there in 1995 after studying to become and be an architect, and I did that for a little bit of time, and but at the same time I just could not understand or fathom why was I so infatuated with the place. Meaning, it didn't make sense. Growing up in Milan, which is where I was born in the 70s and 80s, Milan was not a city that did anything to make you fall in love with it. I mean, unless, I don't know, you worked in fashion or maybe some other areas or people, I don't know. But to me, it was the opposite of a sense of belonging and infatuation with a place. I didn't think that cities, you know, could stimulate such a desire of reciprocal. It seemed.
Did you have a notion that you would love New York even before you lived there? Did you always have a kind of vision of it and a sense of something?
No, on the contrary, I thought I had a very, you know, cynical or detached, because I was fed during my youth, you know, so many images and so much information about this place. I had perhaps the exact contrary, opposite reaction, meaning, you know, let me check this place and see why all these people and so much information is coming from there. And I had the impression of as probably many people do, of knowing a lot about it before even getting there. Mm-hmm. And so I did not want to fall in love or be caught by any strange. Instead, it was the many things that I didn't expect that surprised me. And one of them was this sense of not only wanting to discover it more, same way I felt when I was young and I was going back to Central Italy. My family is from Central Italy, and that area is an area of beautiful landscape. It's not very known. It's on the east side of Italy, the Marche region. It is it's beautiful in a simple way. The villages are nice, but it's not Tuscany. It doesn't have any media behind. There's no, you know, there was absolutely no publicity about that place. But I loved it in a way that felt very pure, because its beauty seemed to me to be an unaware kind of beauty. I mean, it was beautiful, but it wasn't doing anything to show off its beauty. And when I arrived in New York, I felt instantaneously that all of the things that had been shown had nothing to do with the place. New York felt in the 90s still, so probably before was even more, a place that was not at all concerned about showing off itself. It was just very concerned about being itself. And it had a sense of truth about it, of you know, also of curiosity about you and what you thought about the city itself. And this was very strange. In places in Europe, you know, the impression is that you have to study perhaps a lot in order to get to know a place. In New York, you do not need to do that. The past is somewhat recent. And so I was surprised.
Do you think you have to kind of fall in love with a place? You particularly, do you have to fall in love with a place in order to do it justice as an artist?
Well, I don't know. I think, I mean, falling in love is an expression. Artist is another expression that I think it's used way too broadly, and I think the two instead have a true meaning if with the first expression, falling in love, we mean the fact that there is no other way than falling in love, that one should go about in doing almost anything. Otherwise, you are wasting your time. It is perhaps difficult or way too banal to say it that way, because falling in love has a lot of you know, information around it. But I do think that the sense of you know, dedication or interest, you know, the root of interest means to be inside. Inter essere means I am inside that place. So unless you go inside the things that you are doing, you are not fully doing them. And an artist is a little bit, in my opinion, misused or abused as a term, because in reality, if we mean art as something that works, like you know, article, or the root of the word is just something that works within itself, and articulation. And so the two things, if we look at them in terms of meanings, from this point of view, then my answer would be yes, unless you know, you are inside the things that you have to do, or where you are, you cannot understand them. And if you don't see the things that you're working on as something that has to have coherence, you know, within itself, then perhaps something is missing. So yeah, the two, if we look at them this way, then I would say probably both are necessary.
So you've had a really amazing kind of journey through Cityscape, and you share that with us. I've written down, when I was making my notes for this, I was very struck by the generosity of your sharing with people, not just the end product, but also the process that leads to a sort of final realization, but also even often just in, for example, publications of your work, everything is always guided with like another layer of explanation, yes, but also just an access point, making things very accessible to those viewing. Where you have very complex or complicated seeming detail, it's something my students always say when I show your drawings. They say, oh, it's so detailed. All the visual rhythms of the window spaces and all the things that we can see. Would you consider your work to be extremely complicated?
Well, I need glasses now, so I lose vision. My daughter, who's 14, thinks I'm crazy because of the repetition of what I do and the obsessiveness, perhaps. And well, I don't know. I don't know where the you know, I don't know where, you know, simplicity ends and complication begins. Plus, then there is the possibility that complication is less good than complexity, but these are not complex, and maybe they are complicated. So in these cases, I keep, you know, hearing the issue of what do we mean with these words, as we were saying before, with art or falling in love, or because I liked and I appreciate what you said about the sharing and generosity, because I didn't think about it. I think that generosity is a nice word if it accompanies the idea of sharing and you know, a vision or intuition, perhaps. I think art and the word art and the word artist are complicated because I am a little uncomfortable with them, because I think they reinforce ideas that people such as me, in this case, may have of themselves. And so I wish, or I feel that if there is any purpose, as in art, meaning something that works and has coherence, is to erase the boundaries of you as an individual person who is an artist, instead of just somebody who does something with an inner purpose. And so the generosity, the idea of generosity is something that makes me happier, and makes me feel that, yes, for example, my purpose the purpose of the drawings that I do when I look at them is to, for example, to say as much as I can about, say, a cityscape or a window view or whatever other things I am doing myself or assisting somebody who is trying to do them, and to be as clear as possible and as transparent as possible about your objectives. Hardline drawings are the cruelest and most beautiful means to really not only see, the world through somebody's eyes or somebody's, technical abilities, but to see about someone's, decision process. You see where a line begins and where it ends, and why did you draw that line and not another one? Whereas painting, or of course photography or even sketching, in those pieces of production, artifacts, as you have called them in other interviews, which is a word that I like a little bit better, they are somewhat closer to the intuition about what reality looks like to us. So in a painting, the lines are resulting from fields of color or different areas that are painted in terms of feeling. Lines are the result of analysis, and so if I'm drawing lines about the surroundings here, I have to extract a lot of information, or rather eliminate a huge amount of information in order to be precise. So my drawings, I see them more than being very detailed. I see them as the incredible effort of omission. The totality of what we see is not knowable. It cannot be even perceived. So with the line drawing, what we do is that we eliminate an infinite amount of things in order to be able to tell something as we see it, which may also mean as we feel it is, or as we think about it, etc., etc. And the hardline drawings are, as I said before, cruel, maybe is too strong of a word, but they're very much tellers of, they testify the decision-making process and the omissions. And with a sketch, and again with painting, it is the purpose is another one. And these are
people, when they look at your work and they see the city, do you hope that they, through all the information you give them, want to visit that place themselves? Is it almost like is it something that you consider when you are drawing? That, it seems interesting that when you were commissioned to do the mural for American Airlines, you made a kind of mashup of all the destinations around the world. Is that a record of those places, or is it a brochure for those places?
I don't know. I didn't study for this question. I wasn't prepared. I don't know, it's a good question. I never thought about it. The honest answer, I can think about it with I don't, I think, I'm trying to see what other, some kind of analogy. I think in general, one's work, you convey, there aren't real things, meaning things are always seen through experiences, through senses, through, you know, they are, you know, it's an illusion to imagine that there is a, you know, such a city. It's illusory. It is there is a place, you know, that is called such and such, and whose boundaries are theoretically from here to there. But what makes it that? If tomorrow, you know, everybody in the world forgot the words New York, so nobody would know how to name that amalgam of things, I believe that there will still be a lot there left. Whereas maybe somebody forgot the name of, I don't know, a big corporation we don't know, you would be left maybe with telephones or other things, but you would maybe, if everybody forgot to name Motorola or Apple, you would still have objects, but not the idea of that thing. A city has some sort of inner energy, and it is an organic being, and so the desire is to extract as much as possible, you know, the energy or the memories or the impressions or the how you visualize these places that are not places, and so when you do that, automatically you are, imagine you being a writer or any other discipline that involves the transmission of your vision or intuition. Maybe one aspect is that people will want to discover more. But window views are basically, now that I think about it, are a kind of answer to your question, because when I was doing the window view project on New York, I was looking for an additional viewpoint that would give me more clarity into why I was infatuated with the place. And so I wondered if the additional viewpoint was not physical, but was inside other people's minds. And then I realized that I was offering another piece of information about the people who were represented there, who could be seen through their window views. And so I think people who visited, I don't know, books by some of the writers who are included in the book, or they were like doing or listen to Rosanne Cash's music, could visit not the places, but somehow visit with the people by seeing a window view. So it is, there was never a clear purpose of, a causal connection between, I love this place, if I draw it this way, people will want to visit, but I will offer maybe a viewpoint that might allow people to view their own places, their own cities in a different way, because they all deserve to be seen in a different way.
Do you think that in your time with Meyer Partners, you worked on the Jubilee Church in Rome? This church, please correct me if I'm wrong, was really about elevating a district of Rome that was maybe a bit forgotten or down at heel. I'm going to come back to this idea of, through one's art, through architecture, and then through the record of that architecture, the record of the place, we make places desirable, we make places beautiful, and that's an extraordinarily important thing as part of culture. It's an extraordinarily important thing for people who seek a sense of identity with place. When you were working on this project, how did you feel about the sense that through the physical form of a building, the psychological, emotional, philosophical reaction to a place would change?
Well, I think we jumped to the Matteo who wanted to be an architect and who is no longer. Yes, this was many years ago. more than 20 years ago. And yes, it was an incredible experience, because I felt I became more aware of the answer to your questions in the years after. I have to tell the truth. I mean, I had been out of architectural school just a few years, and I was involved in this project in a very intense way. But as a project architect, I was working closely with the project manager, the designer of this building, who was not Richard Meyer himself, but an associate of his, an incredibly intense architect from Prague, from the Czech Republic. And so I learned immensely about the process and about many of the things that perhaps you are saying. And architecture is obviously the place. It does affect the perception of a place, because it is an artificially constructed landscape. So what our eyes, our minds see are shapes and forms, not that come from nature, but that are designed by other human beings. So our perception, the narrative that we unknowingly tell ourselves about a place is immensely affected by architecture. It's like talking about architecture. I think it is almost like talking about I don't know, nutrition, maybe at a lower level, of course, but the effect that architecture can have on people's lives is maybe second to nutrition, air or water or stuff like that. So
it's definitely about something more than beautification.
It is beyond. It's about the narrative of life, how you see yourself in the context of a gigantic system, how you place your life within space, and space is the magical element that is used in the design. In designing architecture, that is not taught. Is not nobody is able to talk about how to design a building, but not design it physically. Architects design using space, what is not there. And the same is with the narrative and storytelling and writing. People use, the tangible things, the visible things, or walls or words, or but to construct something else. And I think architecture as a discipline, if taken with all of the commitment, enthusiasm, and seriousness, and the responsibility behind it, is truly one of the most complex activities that a human being can meet in life. The others are important because they're all connected with narrative and storytelling, or whatever you want to call them, all the visual expressions and writing, etc., etc. But architecture, puts everything together.
And do you think, though, that the architectural sort of sensibility, a sense of having been an architect, that then is present in things that are not necessarily about architecture proper? On the screen here, I just want to tell everybody this is some, well, I guess like process drawings really for illustration you did at the Divine Comedy, where we see various kind of iterations leading up to what would be a finished piece. I'm going to go back to this sense of generosity. You share so much with your audience. We can see how you begin. You share things about how you arrive. What is this, when you're living through this process of making any of your work, do you quite deliberately stop and record the stages in your process? If you do that deliberately, then why do you do that?
Well, it happens sometimes. It does, and in some cases, because it could be useful to remember even for me how I got from one place to the other, and because in many cases the flow is almost there's no seam, it's seamless, and so you stop, you look back, and you see the road you went through. For example, with the Manhattan Unfurled drawing, when I began, I had no idea how long I was going to go, and how long, both time-wise and physically, how long the drawing was going to be. And every few inch of drawing, I would complete what I was working on and add and add and add. And then at some point, there is an incredible process of changing the kind of drawing, the lines, etc. In other cases, there are jumps that are sudden, and they belong to another area of how our mind works. Luckily, by itself, I would say, I have almost nothing to do personally with it. It's just a beginning of putting together elements and coming on another side. And I would call it luck in many ways.
Are you casting spells for the future?
Maybe. Yeah, all you can. For example, the Divine Comedy is the least. I mean, as a commission, it was a publisher who was a scholar or a university scholar publication on a new edition of the Divine Comedy with a commentary from a professor in Princeton, an American, an old professor with a new kind of some new interpretations, and a younger professor who is Italian and teaches in Princeton, who had, when I met him, an unbelievable, passion for the Divine Comedy, not only for being Italian, but because he was able to not let the school kill his passion for the Divine Comedy. We are subject to the Divine Comedy in Italy, of course, as you begin with pasta, pizza, and Divine Comedy, so there's no escape. And I did not enjoy it the way he did during my high school years, because I was forced this thing on my throat. I didn't have teachers who were so incredibly in love with the amazing craziness of this project. And so I was conveyed this amazing passion, but at the same time I was also aware that a drawing of the entire cosmology of the Divine Comedy hadn't been done in many years, meaning centuries, because all of the past vision that was transmitted to us in terms of drawings was done especially about the particular cantos and Hell, Inferno, most of all. And the various drawings of the structure were always divided because there are practical problems, meaning if you cut a section through the earth to look at the triangular Inferno, then you have to show at the same time the outside of the earth, where Purgatorio has all grouped on the other side, and then from there is the beginning of heaven and paradise as a series of layers. And to draw all of that together is not physically, it's complicated, because a section cuts through something, and if there is something above, cannot be seen at the same time. And that was a nightmare for the first year, because I really didn't know what to do until, thanks to, I think, architectural drawing and the architectural way of trying to see everything at the same time as the various elements that compose the everything, I was able to basically extricate myself from this nightmare by lying openly with drawings. So instead of cutting
another kind of spatial conundrum, really.
Yeah.
Across all of the things, when I look across everything that I see of your work, I always return to a sense of space, a question of space, how space is dealt with. So space is allowing, as you've already alluded to, the sort of sense that nothingness allows something to be, that we have to have an understanding of something that's empty or vacant in order to build it up. And even in simply line, the use of line without using tone, shading in any way. Actually, I have a lovely friend and colleague called Sally Farino, who is also a very accomplished and brilliant artist. And she uses line in a very spare, simple way. And I've often thought, and I've said to her, that I consider her line work to be like a scaffold for the viewer to participate in something about the drawing. And when I see your drawings, even very complex seeming drawings, again, this idea of complexity, of detail, nonetheless, there's still an element of it being scaffolded, that space allows something to be, and that in that being, your use of line, the description of shape and form, is so rich with possibility and potential for everything else that I can bring as the viewer to what you do.
Well, thank you. There was, I don't know where what I can add. I mean, I think often we are very concerned with what is there in general terms as an attitude, and I think there are many things to say about what is not there, what is implicit, what is not made explicit, and there are many ways in all sorts of disciplines to confuse other people's minds by making them think that there is more than what one thinks. For example, when one writes in a very complicated way or using too many words, when drawings are not resolved before than when they are produced, and same with spaces or stories. Or so the drawings that I make are not very artistic, I think, because from the not positive usage of the word artistic that I began with, meaning they show the result of a lot of preparation. And so, as you mentioned very kindly, now I hope to offer things that are clear. And if they are clear, it's because there is much more going on before in a way that is not visible, rather than making things that look very dense and or artistic when maybe there is not as much clarity. So the process of drawing, the process, I think, I have the feeling of writing, or definitely of designing architecture, is usually a process of elimination rather than addition. And we are, I think, I have the sense that words like creativity, again, art, etc., are sometimes misleading because we believe that it's the outcome, the final product is the creative lighthouse, meaning it's the creative thing. We need to look at that to understand creativity. And I don't always agree with that, because sometimes it is immensely more useful to, in this stream of information and visuals, it's the other way that matters, to try and go to a source that was the initiating spark that made somebody produce an incredible short story, an amazing piece of architecture. What is the initial spark, and how was it conveyed? And this is very connected with this image of the laboratory of literary architecture. We give too much importance to the outcome. Schools teach how to produce creative things, thinking that if something is produced in such or such a way, is by default creative because it looks like some other creative product. And
I do want to ask you between the kind of relationship between something that has clarity and something that may or may not be complete. Earlier on, when we were looking at your cityscapes and thinking about how much information you give, that is something I've already said, this idea of generosity. You're giving us so much information. But is that work ever complete? It's like an endless, it could be like an endless journey through infinite possibilities of drawing, I suppose. And when you meet young people like the students you've got on the screen here, you know, do you talk to them about relationships between clarity and completeness?
Yes, we're getting very philosophical now, and I may need a sip of this coffee that... I mean, we talk about it, but I think with lightness, in the sense that, for example, I don't, being able to say, that's it, and I'm done now, and I'll do, you know, the perfect thing the next time, is an incredible skill that I wish I had more. And I know people who don't, and in the pursuit of, you know, there is an asymptotical, you get closer and closer to knowingly never getting anywhere. There is no ending to it. It is a process, and it is a process that doesn't end with what you're doing, doesn't end with the next thing you're doing, but and it doesn't end with if you do drawings, it may continue when you take a walk rather than when you do the next drawing. I don't think we are too focused on success or achievement, etc., etc. And so I think the fun, incredibly fun aspect of this, of the process of the Laboratory of Literary Architecture, in which we build the metaphorical, I would say, structures of a literary piece of work, is not it's obviously not the final product. It is not the quality of how well the final model is done. Maybe I'll explain better what the process is. But it is truly, if you have been able to go in reverse into this obsessive mechanism of doing something and try to get to a zone in which creativity doesn't have any final outcome or shape. I think if you are able to suspend for a moment the idea of a final product or completion, or am I done, or what does this mean, etc., and you go backward, you get to an area in which the intuition is very pure, is very primal, and then it can be led according to your inclinations, abilities, or talent, if you have, or how many one has, can be taken in a direction. This is the most beautiful aspect of the process that is connected with this workshop, the Laboratory of Literary Architecture.
How important is it in the Laboratory of Literary Architecture? I would encourage everybody actually to go and look on Matteo's website and to read what the Laboratory of Literary Architecture does, its kind of scope and capacity for teaching and engagement across a really, really wide age range, but also this sense of inquiry. How important is it in terms of being collaborative? In one of your workshops, you know, we're looking at photographs of young people working together, sharing together. Again, this idea of sharing, the generosity of sharing one's creativity. Again, I know it's a loaded word, but for want of a better description, sharing and creativity, how vital is that actually to the development of, again, another loaded word, young artists?
Well, I think no. Instead, generosity is wonderful. Thank you, because I would put it number one. Generosity wins. Creativity, in this case, is there, and because creativity, and then young artists. I don't know, because what does it mean? Again, becoming an artist, being we are really many things every day, and maybe for a few hours we do A, and that means that you are an artist or somebody who makes breads or delivers the mail or whatever. But we cannot be defined by this small thing. But instead, creativity and generosity can be, our constant 24 hours a day, unavoidable way of being, and I think they are essential. The strange thing that struck me from the very beginning of this workshop is that because the question is incredibly broad, but at the same time very clear, which is, we talk about we use architectural terms all the time. We hear at least architectural terms all the time to describe literary structures. So the architecture of a novel, the foundation of a story, a story that doesn't hold up or it's crumbling down, the construction of a sentence, and the words that are like bricks and blah, 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 blah. The very direct question is, okay, with all of that, I hear it, and my curiosity, maybe as an architect or something else, is why don't you show me with the model what you mean? So, meaning, why does this story, why is it well constructed? Why is it working so well? Why is it not falling down? Why is it so well founded? The foundations are so great, etc., etc. And everybody, me, I definitely, before anybody else, get completely lost in front of this question. You don't know what to do, where to turn in order to get an. There is no system that can be taught to bring you to a result, because you have to swim against the current, against the flow of what usually is information. In order to go from A to B and from B to C, you must do all these three things. And then all of them almost inexorably arrive at a moment in which they abandon all the things that are usually known, and they find themselves in areas, in this zone, in which the relationship between the protagonist and the person he or she meets halfway into the story has to be given shape. And only you, who have read the story, knows it so well, knows how to articulate this shape. It's a self-correcting mechanism, because you are in an earlier stage of creativity. You're in the mind of Hemingway or Amy Hempel, and you know well the story, and you can imagine with incredible creativity what may have gone through their mind before creating these conflicts, these dialogues, this tragedy, or this moment of uplifting realization, etc., etc.
I find that really fascinating, you saying about this idea of like prior knowledge of something that feeds into an individual's response to a story and finding that space. I'm going to describe it as a point of a space of maybe where it rushes in is the idea of tension. But also I want to go back to thinking when you were talking to me earlier about New York, and you were saying that actually all your preconceived ideas of New York that had been fed to you through images and movies from the 70s and 80s were in actual fact proven through your experience to be wrong. Is that the same thing that's happening here with these students?
Well, probably. I mean, for example, to hear 15, 16, 17-year-old kids to tell you, finally, I can describe, a story without having to use words is fun. The way they have been able to enter a piece of literature and describe it truly as if they were looking around and just telling what they see is invigorating, and it gives me now goosebumps when I think about it. Unfortunately, it's a very in-person process, and this time is not allowing for any of this to happen. But it is incredible, and perhaps it is similar to when I thought I knew the story. I thought I knew New York City because I've seen it in so many movies, so I know it so well, and I can tell you about New York. If you ask these kids, write a report about Ernest Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, they are very able to fudge or to simulate a good report. And the same thing that happened with scholars in Jerusalem at PhD level of comparative literature, PhD candidates who were told, stop talking, stop telling me about this piece of literature, build it. The impact with not knowing how to move about or put one word after the other, and somehow convince themselves and convince the other people that they were telling you or showing you how much I know about what I was writing. But in reality now I had to show it to you in a different way. The panic or the energy was incredible. And I think that realizing in first person, perhaps as you suggested now, I never put the two things together, but the moment I arrived in New York, but it could have been, any other place. It could have been, I don't know, Alaska or Iceland or, South Africa. I don't know, some place that for some reason, I had been told so much about. I got almost angry or upset with all of the information that I had received, that I had taken such a face value and thinking, oh, this is what it must really be. I could, describe it to somebody else almost by using that information. I thought it was really unfair for the place. It was unfair for me. There was a sense of injustice almost. And yes, perhaps going inside the stories and find yourself, you read the story, you read it so well, and then you have to build it. You find yourself on the other side of the page. And that is liberating. It's fun. It's true fun. And the words creativity, art, it doesn't matter. That girl on the upper left corner, she's describing with her hands how these two elements that are two parts of the story are going to go together. And it's not a report about having read a book and writing about it. It's another world. And this is where I think we all should find ourselves very often and on an almost daily basis.
Do you find that students in this kind of workshop environment, though, are, there's a defiance of expectation, as you're describing, defiance of expectation of what New York might have been like, a defiance maybe in some of these students of what a set text might actually be about. And they come up upon a kind of realization to the process of making, and that really is just a manifestation of inquiry. I'm thinking very much about something I heard, the Library of Exile, which is Edmund Duval, a British author, was invited three rather fellow writers to come and speak to him about being in exile as authors. And it was Alicia Clark was saying that we're not teaching nuanced thinking. We are overloaded with information. And as you say, people can regurgitate and they can share what they know and they can be extremely knowledgeable, but they don't have depth of wisdom in that knowledge. And through these kinds of processes, is this approaching wisdom? Is that another way of thinking of it?
I think it resists a few of some misunderstandings, such as that knowledge is an accumulating process, which is, I think, the biggest, the saddest thing that luckily, I found out too late, but I was into the fact that the more you accumulate, the more you know, the more you know. And I don't. It is important, of course, but it is not what it should be conveyed to kids, or at least when I was young. I think it makes you wonder what knowledge really is and what kind of knowledge really matters, and how the subdivision of disciplines and knowledge apply to different things is a mistake. When I was 15 or 16, I knew that there were cities, I knew that there were cathedrals, etc., but I didn't know how to get to the point of actually designing these things. And to see 15 and 16-year-old kids, and I don't know how early you can go in terms of age, were able to actually design a piece of architecture when they never even knew what being an architect meant, was for them incredible. Meaning, it also resets a sense of trust in the fact that knowledge, experience, or wisdom have a much broader, breadth than we think, and that if we all can go and buy a novel, read it, and talk about it, because this is how it works. We don't need a degree in literature. Why is it that so many people do not express with the same sense of assurance an opinion about a building, or how a building works, and how it may make them feel, or may make them see its functioning in relationship to its impression? Why are we all so distant from architecture, where instead we are born and have lived all of our lives usually in spaces? So we are incredible readers of spaces, as we are readers of many things. I think it makes you wonder and flip the issue, and reading is actually perhaps much more important than turning around and producing. Borges said, I think, that he was very proud, or much prouder of many books that he had read rather than books that he had written. So the act of reading is our daily performance that we entertain almost in every moment of our life. And then we turn to things that somebody else has done without realizing that our act of reading a space, my house, all of the signals that we have around is an incredible work, and we don't trust it for some reason. We rely on experts, and I don't want to say things that are too clear-cut or too much of a black or white, but reading will save, I think, our society. Being able to, to allow ourselves to listen to how we read, or we look outside our own windows, which has changed so much now.
I mean, I'm reading my notes that I'd made in preparation for meeting you this evening, and I have actually put at the top of the page in bold, "We are reading the space around us." Now, I don't know if that was just my observation of what you do, or if it was actually something that you'd said somewhere that I'm quoting, but it seems to be very important, to you. It's very important to me as well, actually, this idea that we accept that we're reading, but that maybe the accumulation of all that knowledge and information, we kind of have to maybe not own it, but feel okay with knowing it, come to terms with it a little bit. I have a question that might seem terribly black and white, but Matteo, what is a teacher?
I mean, we can check the dictionary together if you. I think any answer will be the worst because it's pompous, or I mean, I would say from a personal experience, anybody, including myself, who has been able to be in a position of unfortunately having to teach something and has said, well, I don't know this, or I made a mistake, or actually that's already, I think, we are in the zone, we are in the right area. And this is not something that happens very often. So I think I don't know what is it, but a prerogative should be, you know, completely changing the levels, coming to the person whom you have in front from the same level. So it's definitely sharing. I mean, there is no generosity that because you brought it up, and thank you again. Again, it's obvious because often it's the case from a job point of view. Many teachers, many are great teachers, and they are not necessarily great at the discipline that they teach. And this is an interesting aspect. Observation, at least, it may mean something, but I think it reinforces what you or we were saying. And I think the quote from your notes comes from you, because you clearly have a sensitivity, a curiosity. I mean, yes, we have been exchanging things for many years, but you know, you have a kind of relentless curiosity that doesn't, if you satisfy the curiosity you have at that moment, I think for the little I know you from the exchanges or this conversation, I can actually tell that the more you feed it, the more you become curious. And that means that knowledge in your case, and in sharing with me, trying to give a definition, is not accumulative, meaning the more you feed your curiosity, the more you become curious, and the emptier the space is. So a cup, this glass is most useful when it's empty, because otherwise it will not be able to do its job. So
the next question really though ties in with it, and I mean, it also connects obviously to what's on the screen now. It ties us back into the laboratory of literary architecture. But in as much as what is a teacher, what is a student? You know, are you still, you know, you're talking about endless curiosity. You too are endlessly curious, right? You know.
Yeah, but because I think because by making this attempting to give definitions, we are falling constantly in the same issue, which is what I don't know how to resolve, because we live in a world where language matters. But the fact is that the definition, by definition, define rather than embrace. So the moment you use a word to try to describe, you know, an area, a feeling, or a person, or whatever, you are by default, by definition, making a mistake, because you're eliminating all of the other possibilities and all of the things that one is, the different things and the more things that one thing is. And so the student, by definition.
When you set the project that's on the screen now, though, and then these are all or a selection of the things that you received back from not just children, but just from anyone who participated in your Through the Window challenge when we were in last year. It was a terrible period of kind of emotional poverty for a lot of people, and this perhaps was a means of lifting, of engaging, of making a communication, finding a commonality amongst all of us. When you set the challenge, did you set it from the position of teacher?
Of course not. I mean, no. Of course, no. Maybe from the position of somebody who had experienced drawing windows for more than 10 years, and it had been maybe 12, 13, or 14, I don't know. And I had been working obsessively on one single idea. So no fantasy there, no imagination. You know, is the window a viewpoint that can better describe how people perceive a place? This is it. I mean, I didn't come up with anything that particular, but the repetition and repetition sometimes may not open many other possibilities, but one thing that it may do is to bring depth, because the repetition allows for constant reimagining and rethinking, and also explaining to oneself, Jesus, I'm doing this for years and years, and people around you, as I said, my daughter is saying, Dad, I was born and you were doing this, and when are you going to be done? What does your father do? They asked my daughter. He draws windows. He's an architect, he designs windows. No. So I had the impression that there was much more about this simple act of stopping in front of one window, looking outside a window, but most importantly, stopping and truly looking. And so drawing is, we know, this everybody knows, that the only way to really absorb what is in front of you is not by photographing, it's not by, quickly painting or quickly sketching, although sketching brings there, but to draw it means that you must, touch with your eyes and mind everything that is there. The window allows for a framing, so it facilitates the process. So kids do it more willingly, because you don't have to be an artist, you just have to draw the rectangle and what's inside. So there is no loaded request behind asking all of that. And in time, I realized that in the projects that I did by myself, in which I was drawing the windows, or the ones in which I engaged other people in workshop, the act of drawing a window is the one possibility that diminishes the expectation in terms of artistry, and allows for expression somehow, because you see your world in a different way. And this brought me to the realization that probably looking outside a window is more of a reflective process, meaning you look outside, but there is a tangible thing, like a physical thing, that is the window, but then there is the intangible, that is the outside. It's real because I think the world exists. I'm not one of those crazy people, but it is intangible. You cannot from a window go and rearrange your reality. And so tangible and intangible are strange. They're connected one thing with the other. And you can look outside a window and see the past that brought you there. Imagine the future that will be after, the act of looking. You see the weather changing. So there is a moment in space and time that is, compressed with a lot of metaphorical things. And so during a lockdown, I realized that after all these years, everybody last year understood all of a sudden that the window and the window view had become the one element that connected all of us. And so looking outside a window became loaded with incredible, meanings and symbolisms and expectations and aspirations.
Does that make those drawings, or those kinds of drawings, different than when we're looking back towards many windows at once? Is it a totally different thing?
Meaning, yeah, yes, I did. I think I had always unknowingly wanted to do that. Meaning, I wanted to find what's really there, what's inside, and aside from realizing that there is probably nothing and only an incredible wave of synapses that connect this box with you and with everything around. That was the most intimate viewpoint. So I began from the outside. I could only begin from the outside of the island to look inside, because this is how you arrive at anything. And then I drew the city from Central Park from the inside, but still in the same way. It was luckily a strange metaphorical process to get to the essence, to closer and closer and more inside. And looking from inside these buildings and look out was the otherwise invisible city kind of thing, meaning unless you go there, you wouldn't be able to see that city. To look at the city from the outside and draw everything was, yes, crazy, but kind of understandable. But once you're able to go in and look out, that's the otherwise invisible kind of city. And
I mean, would you hope then that, again, in this sense that you're giving us so much to look at, to understand? I held the book up earlier. I'm going to do it again now. This is the French version. Um, would you hope that your audience kind of participate in the journey along the long line, along the panorama, and they see the city, and that's almost kind of like a passive thing, but that then they can also, without really knowing, but making a kind of leap of faith, enter the inner world through the window? Is that what you hope for the audience?
This is now, let's see here. I no, I don't. That would be perhaps. It would be very welcome, of course, but it would be perhaps a little too mechanical or literal, or I don't know. The hope is that. If there is any, is that again, as I said before, maybe having a different way of looking at things in their own experience. Not that very, because I don't know how, meaning walk around your city and begin to imagine how this triangulation of views can work where you are. So you walk in a street and look up and look there and see these windows, views and metaphorical, connections as physical, real. We are all, interconnected. We learned it in this past year. Our action or non-action, we are told, has an effect on how an entire society, people we don't know, we've never known of any kind of, ideas and political views or whatever, they are all affected by our positively being careful, for example. And so looking outside a window means that we are staying indoors, we are careful, and if we see other people, leaning outside their windows, we are sharing something else. And so these drawings are just drawings, but at the same time, they are a careful and, yes, maybe generous. I like that attempt at rendering what has gone through me in trying to make sense of simple waves of emotions. So if that can be conveyed, if the fact that looking through our windows, both be they real or metaphorical, look at the people we have around every day like a window. Many of the people for whom I've drawn the window view, they had never seen before I drew them their own window views, because they'd never paid attention. So if you learn from this that you may want to pay attention, you may want to pay a different attention, you may want to give a different value to your daily boring routine. In reality, it isn't boring because it's new and fresh every day. Your approach before of the, as we were saying, of the curiosity that feeds more curiosity, means that it's never ever the same. And so that may be more what I would like to happen, but it may not, because the drawings are just simple drawings, but the driving.
Yeah, the drawings are simple drawings, but the city is alive.
Yes, indeed.
And you are, I always feel, inviting me to enter the city on my own terms. I go back to this idea of like a scaffold, that through the use of line, you're giving me the shape and space in which I can operate.
Yes, maybe yes. The invitation to populate it with you, yes. So it is, in fact, there is as little as ephemeral as possible, such as people walking, etc. Because I don't think it would be part of the message or what I care about to show that there are many people, or to show that there are many things that are, temporary, happening, clouds or changes in color. This is you. Yes, you should populate.
Said, I mean, I do have a quote from you here. You've said that physical places need a narrative essence of their own. So I wonder about the, again, language is so clumsy in getting to this. I wonder, in physical places, needing a narrative essence of their own. Like, who has the authority in your drawing to create the narrative?
Obviously, everybody who who encounters them. Yes, I mean the project that I'm finishing now for to support Amnesty International in its 60th anniversary next year. It's I've drawn 60 window views of 60 refugees in their current homes, or where they live now, where they've been able to go as refugees. They are exactly what you just asked in this case. I have done as well as I could, as clear as I could, a window view drawing of the dozens and dozens of photos that they've sent me. And the project is, the fact that they are drawn is so that there is a uniformity in the platform that we are offering. They could have been all photographs, but to take a picture in the same way that is readable then by readers is a little bit more complicated. It should be the same person. And at the same time, by revealing a photo of a window view to the person who owns the window view, my argument is that you are adding not that much more information compared to what they already know. If you instead show them a drawing of their window view, you're showing them a simple, yes, drawing, but that has gone through an incredible process of selection and elimination, synthesis and collection and grouping and all of that. And after that is done, we show them to these refugees the drawing of their window view, and we ask them to contribute a text which has very few kind of guidelines, such as the first of all is that a window is a physical thing, but the view is not. And the act of actively, physically looking is not passive at all. It is affected by the journey, by the experience, by what was your previous view before you abandoned where you come from, whom you have left behind, meaning viewing outside your window now is definitely not the same experience that maybe your neighbor who was born there or in that city has. And then this is, I think, the answer. So the drawing is just providing a visual interpretation as narrative as possible and as much as lines can do. And then the words transform it into an explosive and powerful experience of the act of remembering, of looking, of imagining, of hoping, of blah, etc., etc.
So we're finishing on this slide. This is a photograph that you have on your website. There's Ralph the cat.
Yes.
This idea of there being a kind of intimate nature of how we may encounter, engage with, and render, draw the spaces we live within. We're obviously hugely privileged, and our views from our windows are perhaps extraordinarily kind of benign, and we may be complacent about them. I love the idea, what you're saying earlier, that we really must pay attention to even the smallest detail, to be in that zone, as you call it, the zone of attention. And when you look at the photograph on the website, we come here, you do give us a story, actually. You tell us a lovely story about your daughter being exactly this height. And this is actually a window that's cut in the door of your...
Yes, it's just you can hear this little thing opening. You see, this is... So this is a big closet, which is my studio. And there was the door to access the closet. We put down a wall here, so I have a little bit more room and I can breathe air. But the door in front of me is permanently closed. And when we moved here, my daughter was 7 years old, and she arrived at this height. And so we cut out a piece of the door, exactly framing her face. And so I could, like a monk almost, open this little door, and I see her face right in front of me, and it was cut at the right height, and I would see the corridor where you can see the cat and the main door all the way at the end. But imagine very big in front of you would be my daughter's smiling face. So that was my most incredible window ever. If I ever remember a window view, it would be that with the face of my daughter. Then now she has grown to be 14, and so I can see maybe her belly button now. I don't know what. So it's not anymore the same thing. She has to bend, but yes, I framed. Framing is, I think, is clearly a metaphor of how we see things. A little bit. We need a frame. Otherwise, the continuity of everything can be overwhelming. Although we need to connect with the continuity of everything. But it's useful to have definitions for words. Define with a meaning, or define with a frame, as long as I think we keep in mind that they are only devices in order to be able to connect, I don't know, with other people, and that around the window there is the hole and more and beyond, and even looking through this banal window with the cat there. What's there? It's there is an infinite amount of information, and we just.
So every window is a window on the world, and every window has its own story.
Of course, yes.
Matteo Pericoli, thank you so much for giving me your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you. Also for me, it was wonderful, and thank you. I think I learned a lot. I didn't study as much as I should have, but thank you for being so kind. No, it was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matteo.